Picture this. It is a bright morning in April, and you walk out to one corner of your garden, a corner you planted one time, years ago, and you cut a thick bundle of fresh asparagus spears for breakfast. You did not sow a thing this year. You did not dig it over. You did not buy a single seed. You cut your asparagus, and then you cut a bowl of sweet perennial salad leaves growing right next to it, and you snip a handful of green onions from a clump that has been quietly multiplying on its own since before the kids were born. Then you do the exact same thing next spring, and the spring after that, and every single spring for the next 10, 15, even 20 years off that one planting. Because here is what almost nobody tells you about growing your own food. Most of gardening is a treadmill. You buy the seed, you sow it, you baby it, you harvest it, you pull the whole lot out in autumn, and next year you buy the seed and start all over again from nothing. It is work that resets to zero every single year. But there is a whole other class of vegetable that does not play by those rules. You plant it one time, it settles in, and then it comes back on its own, every year, for a decade or more. And here is the part that really gets me. It comes back bigger every year, because the root system underground is getting older, deeper and stronger while you sit back and do nothing. So this is the countdown. 7 vegetables you plant once and harvest for 10 years or more, counted down to the one that flips the whole idea of gardening on its head, the one that pays you back every single spring for 20 years off one afternoon of planting. One honest note before we start, and then I will not mention it again. Most of these take a season, sometimes 2, to settle in before they hit full stride, so you are trading a little patience up front for 10 or 20 years of harvests afterwards. That is the whole deal. Let me show you the fast one first, because it is the moment this idea flips in your head. Number 7, and this is your fast first win, is a patch of perennial salad leaves. Everybody grows lettuce, and lettuce is the treadmill in miniature. You sow it, it bolts in a few weeks, and you sow it again. But there is a group of leaves you plant once and cut from for years. Sorrel is the one to start with, a lemony, sharp green that is up before almost anything else in spring, and a single clump will hand you leaves from March right through to the frosts, then vanish for winter and come back on its own, fatter, the next year. Add perennial rocket, which is sharper and far longer lived than the annual kind, and a clump of land cress that tastes just like watercress but grows in ordinary soil. Eric Toensmeyer, who wrote the book Perennial Vegetables, calls sorrel one of the most reliable perennial greens there is. You plant a few small plants one time, and you have a salad corner that reappears every spring with zero sowing. Cut the outer leaves, leave the middle to keep going, and it just keeps coming. Leaves on the plate within weeks, and then every year after that for free. But leaves are the easy part. Number 6 is a vegetable almost everyone is certain you have to sow fresh every single year. Number 6 is perennial kale, and this one genuinely stops people. Kale, cabbage, all the brassicas, everyone treats them as annuals, or at best a single winter crop you rip out and re-sow. But there are kales that do not die back. Tree collards, and named perennial kales like Taunton Dean and Dobintons grow into a woody, waist-high, sometimes shoulder-high shrub of edible leaves that you crop from for 5, 6, even 10 years without ever sowing a seed. They almost never flower, so they never bolt and quit on you. They just keep pushing fresh new leaves from the top, and you do not grow them from seed. You take a cutting, a snapped-off side shoot pushed into the ground, and it roots and becomes a whole new plant, which means once you have one, you have them for free forever. Alison Tyndale, who runs Backyard Larder and has grown these for years, says you can keep a family in greens off just 2 or 3 plants. Plant one this year, and in a couple of seasons you have a permanent evergreen hedge of kale that shrugs off the winter and feeds you in the hungry gap when nothing else is standing. Number 5 is one you have definitely bought in a plastic bag from the shop, and you will never need to again. Number 5 is the onion family, and specifically the ones you never replant. A supermarket spring onion is a thing you buy in a bag, use twice, and leave to rot in the fridge, but Welsh onions and Egyptian walking onions and a fat clump of chives are all perennials. You plant a few one time, and they multiply themselves into a permanent clump that you snip green onions from all year round, and it gets wider and more generous every single season. The walking onion is the strange, wonderful one. It grows little bulbs on the top of its own stalk. The stalk bends over under the weight, plants them for you a step away, and quietly walks itself across the bed. That is where the name comes from. Add perennial leeks and a patch of garlic chives, and you have covered every green onion job in the kitchen without ever buying another bunch. Charles Dowding, the no-dig grower, keeps clumps of these going for years and simply divides them when they get too big. One clump becomes four, for nothing. Plant it once, and the onion aisle is just off your shopping list. Number 4 goes underground, to the roots that come back on their own, and one of them is so tough you will struggle to ever get rid of it. Number 4 is Perennial Roots, and this is the set and forget corner. Horseradish is the famous one. You plant a single piece of root one time and it comes back forever, so reliably that the real skill is keeping it in bounds. A bucket sunk in the ground, or a corner all its own, stops it wandering. Grate it fresh, and it is 10 times what you get out of a jar. Then there is skirret, an old, almost forgotten perennial root the Romans and the Tudors grew, a cluster of sweet white roots a bit like a nutty parsnip. You dig it, take what you want, and replant a crown to grow again next year. And there is the Jerusalem artichoke, a sunflower relative that makes knobbly tubers underground by the bucket load, comes back every year whether you want it to or not, and crops in the hungry end of winter when the ground is otherwise bare. Plant a few tubers once, and you have a permanent supply. These are the crops you tuck in a back corner, walk away from, and they just quietly feed you every year with no attention at all. Number 3 is a plant so striking your neighbors will think it is a flower border, right up until you eat it. Number 3 is the artichoke, the Globe Artichoke, and it might be the most beautiful vegetable you will ever grow. It is a giant silver thistle, taller than you, that throws up big edible flower buds every summer for years off a single planting. One established plant gives you 10-15 heads a season, and it comes back bigger and throws more each year as the crown fattens up. Martin Crawford, who runs the Agroforestry Research Trust and has grown perennial crops for decades, treats the Globe Artichoke as a backbone of a permanent food garden. It earns its space as food and as a stunning plant at the same time. You can grow it from seed, but the quickest way is to plant a rooted offset, and every few years you split the clump and you have brand new plants for nothing. Plant 2 or 3, and you have a run of artichokes every summer, a vegetable that costs a small fortune in the shops for years off one afternoon of work. Number 2 is the one your grandparents almost certainly had, the plant that comes back bigger every single year like clockwork. Number 2 is rhubarb, and rhubarb is the purest example of this whole idea. You plant one crown, one time. The first year, you leave it completely alone, and from then on, every spring it sends up those thick red stalks, and it does the thing this entire list is about better than anything else. It comes back bigger every single year for 10, 20, even 30 years off that one planting. An established rhubarb crown is an enormous, generous plant that gives you far more than one family can eat, stewed, in crumbles, in jams, from early spring right through the summer. It asks for almost nothing, a shovel of muck on top in autumn, and that is genuinely it. And when the crown gets huge, after a few years, you split it in half with a spade in winter and you have 2 plants, then 4, free forever. The Royal Horticultural Society will tell you a rhubarb crown crops well for a decade or more. Plant it once, feed it a shovel of compost a year, and it will outlast the fence, the shed, and quite possibly you. and number one is the king of them all. And number one, the one that flips the whole idea of gardening on its head, is asparagus. Here is why it is number one. You plant asparagus crowns one time, in a bed you prepare one time, then you wait. You cut nothing the first year and barely anything the second, and that patience is exactly why most people never grow it. They cannot see past 2 springs, but here is the payoff. From the third year onward, that bed sends up fresh green spears every single spring for 20 years, sometimes 30, off that one planting. 20 years of one of the most expensive vegetables in the entire shop, cut fresh at dawn and on your plate 10 minutes later, sweeter than anything you have ever bought. Do the sums on that. A handful of crowns and one afternoon of planting against 2 full decades of asparagus you would otherwise pay a premium for every single spring. That is the whole philosophy of this channel in one vegetable. It was never about how much land you have. It is about planting something one time and letting it pay you back for 20 years while you do almost nothing. That is the asparagus deal, and that is why it is number one. So there it is. 7 vegetables you plant one time and harvest for 10 years and more. Perennial salad and sorrel for your fast leaves, perennial kale for greens through the winter, the onion clump that multiplies itself, the tough perennial roots in the back corner, the artichokes that double as show plants, the rhubarb that comes back bigger every year, and the asparagus bed that feeds you for 2 decades. Notice what ties them all together. You are not refilling the same beds over and over from nothing. You are planting a permanent, productive corner, one time, and letting the roots do the compounding while you get on with your life. It was never about the acre, it is about how hard each square foot works, year after year, for free. So do not try to plant all 7 this weekend. Pick one. Put in a rhubarb crown, or a clump of perennial onions, or a few asparagus crowns, and let it settle. In a couple of springs it will be feeding you, and it will not stop. If this is your kind of gardening, the whole Small Space series is in the playlist, and subscribing to 1 Acre Blueprint brings you the next build. I will see you there.